There we go. I think that's working now. Says setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. So there we go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Vintage Books Live. Tonight, we are very excited to have a group of local mystery writers with us. They were in the store on Saturday, and tonight we're virtual. We're going to do a little bit different things on each time. So if you happen to catch the visit in the store on Saturday, this will be a little bit different than when you saw there. I'm Christy Peterson from Vintage Books. I've got 6 mystery authors with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and their latest book to you. And I'm going to start with Paula, who on my screen is just to my left. So if you want to go ahead and start, that would be lovely.
Sure. I'm right next to you on my screen too. So I'm Paula Charles. I write cozy mysteries. I write the hometown hardware mysteries, which is set in a small town in the mountains of northeastern Oregon. And then as Jana Rollins, I write the Zen Goat Mystery Series, which is goat yoga set on a farm in New Hampshire.
Hey. And Christy, do you want to introduce your book?
Yes, my name is Christy Kendall, and I am a debut author. My first book is titled Eerie Ending, and it will be out in April. I write traditional mysteries. I think that's what you'd call them. They're certainly not cozy. And these are set in national wildlife refuges. Each book takes you to a different location, but you'll see repeat characters throughout the series.
Awesome. Cindy, you want to jump in next?
Yeah, I have 2 series going. The first one is a probation case files mystery series. Right now there's 2 out, Obey All Laws and Early Termination. They follow a probation officer, Casey Carson, through her misadventures. And then I have a cozy series. The first book is Diamond in the Rough, RUFF, a Wigglebutt Manor mystery, and the first one of that series releases in May. So yeah.
And Gary, you're on the bottom of my screen at the bottom of my circle. So would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Gary Corbin. I live in Camas, Washington. I write, well, I have 3 different series, and they're all slightly different genres. The first is sort of a courtroom drama called Lying in Judgment. And it's about a guy serving on the jury of a murder trial in Portland for the crime that he committed. That's a 2-book series. The second series is the one I'll actually read from tonight, and that is the Mountain Man series. And that is a little bit lighter. It's an amateur sleuth series about a guy who discovers an injured dog on the highway and adopts it, and the rest of his life goes to hell. It's all because of dogs. And the third is the one I'm about to release the 6th book of, and that is the Valerie Dawes Thrillers. That's a police procedural featuring a young policewoman on the rise who is battling not only the creepy men who victimize women in society, but also her fellow police officers who have erected quite the firm glass ceiling. And my 6th book comes out next month, March 25th.
All right. Emmeline, would you like to go next?
I'm Emmeline Duncan. I am the author of 2 current series, the Ground Rules Mystery Series, which is all based around a coffee cart and roastery in Portland, Oregon. And the 5th book in that series comes out at the end of April, Fatal Bruhaha. And I'm also the author of the Halloween Bookshop Mystery Series. The first book in that, Chaos at the Lazy Bones Bookshop, came out the end of last July for Halloween. And if I suddenly say ouch or if I'm suddenly noisy, it's because I have a 6-month-old kitten who keeps biting my hands.
Nice.
Put her on screen since she
Oh,
keeps
there we
biting.
go. Oh,
This is Matilda.
Yeah,
I think that's the future star of a new series.
there you go.
She came from the engine block of my neighbor's van, so clearly she should be the lead of her own mystery series.
With her sidekick Waylon.
Yes.
And Mary, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Mary Keliikoa. I actually have 2 series. and a standalone. I write traditional mystery. My first series centers around a single mom PI she's a single mom to a deaf daughter who has inherited her father's detective agency. And it's set in Portland, Oregon. And it's the process of her basically becoming her full-fledged PI. I write a police procedural, which is set at the Oregon coast, and it's the Misty Pines mystery series. And the third book in that series, Killer Tracks, will be out in September of this year. And then I write Domestic Suspense, which is my standalone, Don't Ask, Don't Follow, set in Portland once again. And it's set in a law firm, which is where I spent 18 years of my life, younger life, as a paralegal. So thought I'd pull some lawyer knowledge in and
Nice.
a murder right in the middle of
and
law.
murder, yeah,
Yes.
as one does.
As one
All
does.
right. So what we've been doing, if those of you who missed the previous episode of Vintage Books Live in January, is that we've switched from a weekly format to a monthly format for various reasons, not least of which is it's just gotten really busy at Vintage, which is great, but it means that I needed to cut back a little bit on the amount of events that we were doing. And actually, it's been really fun because instead of one person at a time, we're bringing groups of people and to have a discussion about a specific topic. And so I actually thought it was really interesting to think about setting in mysteries. And it kind of seems a little obvious until you start to think, well, where is the crossover in mysteries with cozies versus traditional? And where are there some differentiations? So I thought I'd gather a group of my favorite mystery people to talk about that. So if you could just start out talking about how you think about setting when you start to write a book, maybe particularly as you've thought about a series. Are there things that you think about I guess the best word is vibes. Like, a cozy mystery has different vibes than maybe a traditional mystery. A thriller has maybe different vibes than maybe a courtroom procedural or that kind of thing. And so I'm going to start back down with you, Mary. Do you think a lot about setting, or is that just kind of something that comes for you later as you get through the plot? And I imagine this depends on the author too, because everybody approaches their writing a little bit differently. But when you're thinking about setting, what are the elements that you put into it when you're thinking about it to make the vibe be right, the sort of the atmosphere be right for the mood that you want to set for a book?
Yeah, so I really think about it when that story seed starts to grow. I start really thinking about the story as a whole, where I want it to unfold, but also what's going to, like for me, setting is a character. So I like to see where I can weave it in with the existing real life characters, how it can set the tone, how it can set challenges and obstacles for my characters. I don't want it to be too easy. Like right now, I'm working on a new book and I want a closed room element to it. And so, where can I create a setting that adds that level of suspense? And so, I'm starting to think about that as right from the very beginning. In Misty Pines, of course, the Oregon coast with the fog and the moss hanging from trees, that becomes a setting. And when you walk into the scene, you almost know immediately that there's going to be obstacles to overcome or kind of that creepy vibe right from the beginning. And that's what I really aim for in all my books, for sure.
Emmeline, you write cozies. How do you think about setting both the same and maybe differently than if you maybe were going to set out to write something more serious is the wrong word, with a more sort of darker, more gritty vibe? Yeah.
Well, I don't think I would think of it that differently, because so much of the setting is also, your character and your setting are very intertwined. Because if you think about it, people like we're not born in a vacuum, and the events that you've gone through in your life, like it changes how you react to things. And so your character and your setting are very much
I
are
know,
very
it's
much
little ears just spoke
Ears
up. That's
coming up.
awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, it's funny. And so, I mean, it's just that, like a character that has a cat, right, that gets in their Zoom calls is different from than someone who would never, would not have a pet because they can't handle any like dust in their house. And that's actually going to change the setting that they're in, right? Because, where they're going to choose to live, even within a city where they value. And we could talk about this more when we get to reading pieces. But for me with setting, like I don't ever have like long blocks of talks ever talking about it.
Right.
It's always like small, a couple sentences woven in, because it's always how the character is reacting to the world they're in, to the setting they're in. And also, I mean, what the murder and mystery, the murder has to make sense. And so it has to make sense that it could happen in the setting that it's in, right? You have like you're kind of like a very like English mystery where it's like some big festival and someone dies and we got to solve it because we can't let it get in the way of our 50th annual like snail chase. It's going to be very different than if you're like a PI and it's gritty and you're going in like Mary has a book in a homeless shelter. That's a very different story that's just going to happen, but that's very based off of character.
Yeah. So. Thank you. Gary, how do you think about it? Because you've written 3 different series that have very different feels. So how do you think about it when you're approaching it?
Well, like the other said, for me, setting is a character. It's not just a place where things happen. It has agency. It makes things happen in the story. Of course, it sets the mood. It sets the tone. It is the place where stuff happens, but it also creates opportunities and obstacles for the main character to get to solve the mystery. It shapes them as well, as Emmeline said. They're a product of their place. So your main character, in my case, they're all products of their place. They all came from there. But there's also characters from outside, and they're the fish out of water that don't know how to act properly in that setting. And that's always a lot of fun for a writer. So like, how can this person who is not from Portland in the case of Lying in Judgment, or is not from Central Oregon in the forest area, how do they act in that setting, and how do they stand out as different sort of oddballs? And most of mine do tend to be on the gritty side. The settings, but in different ways. Lehi in Central Oregon as a forester, he's a logger, he's close to the earth. Everything, all of his analogies, all of his logic revolves around a very rural setting, the trees, the earth. He's good at seeing footsteps in the grass and disturbances in the forest. He wouldn't know a broken window if it hit him in the head, right? He's just not. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but he's not urban. Whereas Peter and Val, who are city folk, they're urbane, they're sophisticated, and a little bit edgy.
Cindy, what are you thinking about? Like I think you have an interesting contrast in that you have a cozy series and a very gritty series. What do you see as the contrast? Because, I mean, as you're setting out to be as a writer to write, and everybody has kind of said that, you create a character, you create a world, you create a problem. There's a lot of just sort of innate stuff that comes with that. But since you're writing both side by side and essentially you're working on 2 series at the same time, do you have to think about what your tone is and what you focus on as far as setting goes to make sure you don't like skew too far one way or the other when you're writing in each book? Or does it just kind of come naturally because you put yourself in that place?
Well, my probation series takes place in Phoenix, and that's reality. That's where I used to work and live and everything. And I'm not a fan of Phoenix. I will just say that. It's just too hot for me, which is why I live here now. So I think I probably portray a lot of the more negative sides, like you can't touch your steering wheel or sit down in your seat because, you can't leave your water because it's boiling by the time you get back in the car, things like that. But, it's really, the setting is like true. And I go back every year and look around and see what's changed so that I can keep it current. Whereas my cozy, I made up the place. It doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
So I felt free with that. It's a lot more fun. And I based it. So my cozy, it takes place in a fictitious island community in the Pacific Northwest called Orca Cove. And I kind of based it off the San Juan Islands.
Yeah.
Kind of Astoria, Oregon, a little bit, like pieces of everything. And so it just felt a lot easier. But some of the feedback I got when I first started writing it was that it wasn't cozy enough. So I kept having to go back and take some of the grit out that I have in
Yeah.
the Ocean series and make it just like this magical place kind of thing. And I'm not putting down cozies or anything. I'm kind of new to the cozy world, so I hope I got it right, is I guess
Yeah.
what
No, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not writing cozies, but I wouldn't feel like that's a negative at all. It's just, it's interesting to me as a writer who has a hard time focusing on more than one project at a time, like the idea of having to have such different tones at once. It makes sense that you might have to go back and tweak because you need it to be more one way or more the other way. So
once I get into the world, I'm there. It's fine.
yeah.
But I can't, I thought I could write one in the morning and one in the afternoon. No. I just
Yeah.
have one project at a time. So yeah.
Yeah. Christy, I know you read a piece on Saturday. I mean, that clearly because they're going to be set in wildlife refuges, specific places, like that's obviously a super important thing for
Yes.
your books.
Yeah.
Do you think about how you talk about that place though in relation to the mystery? I mean, I picked up on a few things that you were doing with the reading that you read to make it feel more darker. But how do you think about it when you're working on it?
Well, first of all, I do put long pieces of setting into my book because the people who will be reading these books are interested in maybe going to those places. For me, setting places have a strong impact on me. I go into a home or into a neighborhood or into a park and I feel different things. So people have asked me, why haven't you written about this refuge yet or that refuge where I've worked? And well, I haven't gotten that vibe yet from it, like I could kill someone here. That's kind of what it comes down to. But setting to me, like everyone else has said, it provides obstacles. It also helps me to bring out who my characters are, how they deal with those obstacles, how they take them. When I first started writing this book, I was told that, she comes across a dead body and thinks nothing of it. I mean, she just moves on. And I thought, oh yeah, well, that's because life and death on a refuge is a everyday occurrence at some level. And it is not uncommon to find a dead body somewhere if you're off in a remote area, those sorts of things. Refuges and parks are places where people don't know that National Park Service has to deal with suicides, murders, gang symbols. Like on one refuge, we found body parts displayed in certain areas. So yes, to me, setting is everything. And I want to take you there. I want you to feel like you're in that place. In Eerie Ending, I wanted you to feel that swamp on you, or, to hear that pied-billed grebe calling across the marsh, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Paula, you are also writing two series. Yours are two cozies. But again, like you have to set a different tone for each. How did you think about that?
It actually came pretty easy because of the two different series that I'm writing. The first one, my Hometown Hardware series, my character came first because that's my first book that I ever wrote, is the first in that series. And while I was trying to think of what to do, I came up with using my grandmother as inspiration, which then I used my hometown. I fictionalized it, but so it's that setting is very, very easy for me because it's a very small town in northeastern Oregon. It brings up feelings of nostalgia in me, which is perfect for a cozy setting. So, that one worked really easy. And then when I thought about the second one, actually the setting came first because I had gone back to New England. My husband is from New England, and I fell in love with the area and decided that if I set a book in New Hampshire, then I'd have to go back for research. So it was just an evil plan.
Oh, what a terrible thing.
Right? Awful. But so then when I thought about, okay, what am I going to do here? I knew I wanted it set on a farm. Well, I was raised on a farm. We have, I mean, just a small farm, just 1 acre, but I have goats in my barnyard and chickens. And so that is easy too, but they are different.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't tough, but like, everybody else has said, I want my setting to be a character that people want to return to because that's the cozy world. People start to feel like friends and the setting feels like friends and people want to go and visit. And that's what you're striving for somewhat as a cozy author.
Did you have a passage? I know some people were going to have passages that they read and some that people might not, but would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I actually picked one from my newest, so it's the second book in my hometown hardware, the one set in northeastern Oregon, Ask Me No Questions. And it's just a small setting or a small passage that I use the setting to build some tension because it can be used so many ways. All right, so Yvonne was steering the SUV around the sharp corners of Secaucus Grade and down into the chiseled canyon. The steep route was the only way to get to the small town of Lost Canyon. Far below the gray stone sides of the deep canyon, I could barely make out a glimpse of the Secaucus River. With each switchback, the river got closer. On the far side, dense patches of evergreen trees covered the hills, stretching down to the waterline. Yvonne and I both gasped as we came around a hairpin turn near the bottom of the grade. Mangled and dented guardrails clung precariously to the post with a 10-foot long chunk missing altogether. Yvonne slowed the Nissan to a crawl. Holy fright, this must be where, I'm not going to say the name, went over the edge. I shuddered. I can't even imagine how scared she must have been. A sudden swirl of vertigo hit me as I imagined blank, frantically trying to pump brakes no longer working, only to have her pickup fly off the road and into thin air before tumbling down the rocky face of the canyon. Yvonne's knuckles were white as she tightened her death grip on the steering wheel. I can't look. Her voice fluttered and cracked. Please don't, I said.
Nice. Thank you.
Welcome.
Mary, do you have a passage that you wanted to read? Or
there you go. Yeah. So I was going to read just a very short from Hidden Pieces, which is the first book in the Misty Pines series. And it's chapter 1 where Jax is heading to the beach to kill himself. That's how the book stories. We start with Jax at a very low point. And so I thought I'd just read a really short one on it. So he aimed toward the sea. He parked on a stretch of solid pack a few yards from the surf. The foamy fingers of the ocean reached for his cruiser, coming up short. The weather report called for 90 degrees in the city located 80 miles east, which meant an inversion for everyone on the coastline. His future, or lack of one, floated in the horizon where gray ocean met gray clouds, both soon to be indiscernible in the impending fog. Damn, he was tired of being tired. The window down, he sucked in the brackish scent of the seaweed littered shores. Seagulls swarmed overhead. Their plaintive cry sent a wave of grief through him. So that's how I kind of used, the symbolism of the ocean to his grief. Yeah.
Christy, do you have a passage you were going to read?
Yes, I think mine's going to be slightly longer.
That's okay.
Than anyone else.
We've got time.
In this scene, Angela Martin is the refuge manager, and she has a lot on her mind. She's upset over this murder, and she's also upset that her friend was incarcerated. And she just learned that her personal life is now at a crossroads, and she's just in a mood. So she takes off for a long walk. Angela donned the chest waders, giving herself a quick covering of bug spray. A few mayflies stuck to her and tangled themselves in her short hair, but she ignored them. She was in the midst of life. Even the whine of mosquitoes was not a deterrent while her bug spray was doing its job. As she stepped through the cattails, she smelled the pungent scent of decaying plant life released under the pressure of her boot. This rotten egg-like aroma evoked thoughts about the cycles of life and death on earth. To all things an end must come. A breeze carried the light sour scent of gulls, fish, and mussels. The sweeter smells of thistle, milkweed, and wild cucumber countered. Potamogeton, duckweed, and water milfoil were abundant. Snails and aquatic insects were attached to the plants, feeding on them for nourishment. Angela was gaining emotional sustenance with each step. Pickerelweed and water lotus sent up blooms, creating floating bouquets. Her boots oozed and sucked through the marsh, stirring up gray sediment with each step. An eastern kingbird flew by her, while a tufted titmouse called, "Peter, Peter, Peter." The piercing whistles of cardinals sounded through the nearby woodlands. The marsh would mature through the summer to supply abundant food for ducks and geese later in the fall, the season that Angela loved more than any other. When autumn arrived, the weather would turn cold. The trees would flaunt their vibrant yellows, oranges, and reds. But now the lush greenery above her only intensified the warmth of a summer day. Angela could see the refuge boundary's small white metal sign. The stylized blue goose on it spoke to her. It was more than the marshes here along Lake Erie. She belonged to this refuge. Angela wandered on, caught up in her daydreams, when she felt the ground slide out from under her. Too late, she realized she'd stepped into a deep trench. It was one of the ditches that led to the main pump to empty the marsh. Caught off guard, she had no time to catch her breath before the chest waders filled with water. Her head was below the water within minutes. Angela struggled to get to the surface, but it was useless. The waterlogged waders pulled her down. She couldn't kick her legs effectively enough to swim. The channel was deep, and Angela hadn't touched bottom yet. The weight of the waders made it impossible to pull the straps off her shoulders to shed them. The urge to gasp for air was overwhelming.
That was the cliffhanger. That's not fair. It's coming out in April, everybody. So, Emmeline, did you have a passage you were going to read today?
Yeah, I looked through a couple of my books and I chose one of the longest, kind of more like truly setting passages, but this I think is fun. So March. Some years in Portland. Oh, and this is from Death Unfiltered. March. Some years in Portland, it rains buckets. Other years, it's warm and sunny and fools everyone into thinking spring came early. But as I stood on the front porch, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. Snow. And not just a gentle dusting, but at least an inch of powder, giving the world a magical feel that would be perfect at Christmas. And it was still snowing heavily, promising a winter wonderland. Or considering what usually happens around here, my fellow Portlanders would treat this like a snowpocalypse. One of the times this happened, the local Fred Meyer quickly ran out of kale. Because what else do you need when you're stuck at home when schools and businesses close for the day, but bitter leafy vegetables?
Nice. Based on real life, even.
Exactly.
Cindy.
It's real life, if you use a real location, like the local news, and
Yeah,
what
yeah,
happens is
exactly.
like the best inspiration.
I love that.
Sorry, I have a little bit of a tickle in my throat.
That's okay.
Need some water. So this is towards the end in early termination. So I'm just gonna read it. Telegraph Pass Road weaved through the South Mountain. Man-sized cactus stood in the shadows like soldiers. Clouds obscured the moon, and light raindrops sprayed the windshield, bringing a chill to the air. Close to the trail, Betts pulled off the road and parked. He said, "No cops," I said. "Can you at least try to look like a civilian?" We got out of the SUV, and Betts tucked his shirt, letting it fall over the sidearm holstered to his belt. The darkness would help. I had left my gun, part of the Diablo crime scene, behind. I knew the area. From this part of the National Trail, it was just a half-mile hike to the stone hut where Justin told me to meet him. Switchbacks and loose gravel on the mountain-hugging path made the climb tricky in the black of night, the reason the park closed at dusk. The light from our cells was just enough to see a few steps in front of us, not enough to spy rattlesnakes or other desert creatures lurking in the shadows. I tried not to dwell on that. The only sound was our breathing as we navigated the sometimes steep pathway. Intermittent rain fell, dampening our clothes and hair and making our footing slick. As the structure came into view, we stopped and looked at each other. Betts reached out, took my hand, and squeezed it before letting go. Stay close, he said, his voice low.
That is not a hike I would like to take. Thank you very much. Gary, would you mind finishing it off for us?
Sure. I'm going to read from The Mountain Man's Dog. I'm just going to read the open of the book. Lehi slowed down around the S-curves on Brady Mountain Road even before the speed limit sign told him to. The fog rolled in thicker here due to the nearby lakes, intensifying the dark and making the night seem much later than it was. A guy never knew what the night fog might throw out of the woods in Oregon's Cascade Mountains, especially in late September. He didn't want an adventure on Thursday night. He just needed some groceries, stuff that old man Patterson's market didn't carry, and anyways, he closed at 5 o'clock. So, as much as he hated doing it, Lehi had to drive down the mountain into town. Just go to Winco, get some groceries, and leave. No distractions. He braked just in time not to kill a coyote darting across the highway. It startled him, and sweat rolled down his back in spite of the chill. He shook his head and took a heavy breath. Focus on driving, dumbass. Don't get all riled up. He kept his speed down below 40. Good thing, as it enabled him to brake in time once again, this time to avoid hitting a yellow hound dog limping across the road. Well, normally he'd call it a good thing. In coming years, Lehi often argued it was anything but. He wasn't much of a dog person, ever since Uncle Ted's German Shepherd near tore his hand off as a kid. Or so he remembered. The injury grew with every retelling. Lehi didn't so much fear dogs as loathe them. Dogs were nothing but a nuisance. Noisy, smelly, always needing attention and cleaning up after. Kind of like a kid that never grows up. Still a committed bachelor at 37. His position on kids was pretty clear. He came to a full stop for the yellow hound. It limped so badly it hardly moved, really. Its brown eyes reflected the glare of the truck's headlights, making them shine red like the indicator lights on his dashboard. The dog froze in his tracks as Lehi waited. Then it lay right down across the center stripe, its bleeding belly exposed and vulnerable.
Oh no! So I'm gonna pose a question that I didn't fully warn everybody about, just for anybody watching. So we could take a minute to think about it if you need to, but I got to thinking, what if the scene that you read, what if you were writing the opposite type of mystery than what you were? So in the case of Emmeline and Paula, like, what if it wasn't a cozy mystery? What if it was more gritty? And for the rest of you, like, what if it was a cozy? Like, what would change about the scene? Because you're still going to describe the setting. It's still part of the story. But what language would be different if it wasn't what it is in the stories that you read? So Paula, I mean, I know I'm putting you on the spot because you're the first one I'm going to ask. Oh, go ahead.
I can go. I say I can go.
Yeah, go ahead, Emmeline. Yeah, that'd be great.
I'd say when you write, it's your point of view that you write for is almost like a camera view. And in a cozy mystery, you're going to highlight some of the funnier or like kind of the, I don't say happier, but you're not necessarily going to focus, even if you might briefly mention the gritty, that's not where the camera angle is like really going to focus on. And so if I was writing a mystery, so for a cozy, it's kind of looking at kind of the humorous part of snow in Portland and everyone, everything closing down. If it was grittier, it would be definitely focused probably on potentially more the negative parts, right? If you're a PI and you're like looking for someone homeless, you're going to be like, oh no, right? Or is the person I'm looking for going to die? And maybe, there's going to be like grittier stuff you're going to look at, or you can't, if you're going to have trouble getting to work and you really need to be there for some reason, your reaction is going to be much more negative versus like, oh, hope they don't sell out of kale again.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I was thinking for Paula, like what the one that you read actually is a little bit grittier as opposed to like maybe describing the hardware store or something because they're describing something that it was bad that happened on that road.
Yeah, exactly.
Would there be a little bit of a change in the language that you used if it was a little grittier or would it be similar?
Well, that's a very good question because so far I have only written cozies
Yeah, yeah.
for one reason, because I've been told my voice is cozy. I tried
Yeah,
to write
yeah.
grittier and it didn't come out that way.
Yeah.
So that's a very good question. I do think, there's definitely ways, even though I use that scene to build some tension, there's definitely ways there to write the same scene a lot more tense than I
Yeah,
wrote.
yeah.
Um,
Would you use like there were a couple moments where I kind of smiled like when it was like, they're gripping the steering wheel or something. Is it is humor involved in making the scene a little bit lighter?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, parts of it that I didn't read to you that are the same scene, they're eating donuts and they're drinking hot apple cider and they're talking about how they traumatize their kids by telling them, different stories uh, about different road trips. So, I think in a traditional or a grittier, you would just up that tension. Like I said, I can't
Yeah.
tell you for sure
Yeah.
because I don't write
Yeah.
them.
No, and I would
But yeah,
yeah,
there's
that's
a
why I
lot of
said this would
humor
be put
throughout.
it put us outside our comfort zone a little bit, but it's just an interesting exercise for me as a reader even to
Mhm.
think, well, what makes this what it is and Mary, I think about that scene that you read, is there like if you were writing a cozy, are there different language or different things that you would pull out of that same scene?
I would probably put people on the ocean shore. I probably wouldn't have as much fog, or if
Yeah,
I would add some humor to it. I would
yeah,
make his suicide attempts thwarted at every turn. I mean, it'd be like I'm trying to kill myself, but every time I'm about to kill myself, people show up. There'd be
yeah,
some weird thing about it. Of course, it's a pretty gritty, dark book, so
yeah, yeah, yeah,
could not
yeah.
be converted into a
No,
code.
you could not. Yeah, I was just thinking about these particular scenes that we're talking about.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what elements of them make them like what language choices, what elements
Yeah.
make them gritty versus not, which I
Yeah.
think is interesting.
Yeah, like the plaintive cry of the seagull is really a symbolic type of
Yeah,
thing, right?
yeah,
Seeing his future or lack of one in the haze. I mean, those types of things
yeah,
they'd be lightened up. I think
yeah,
they wouldn't
yeah,
reference them as a negative. They'd be more blue sky and
yeah. Or the some kind of antics of the seagulls rather than
exactly
yeah,
arguing over
yeah,
garbage or
yeah,
people showing
yeah,
up and that type of
yeah. Interesting. What about you, Christy? I mean,
I don't think I'd have to change too awful much, but instead of
yeah,
throughout my books, there's cussing,
yeah,
but there's also much more serious situations that she gets herself into because there are the kinds of things that can happen to you when you work
yeah,
on.
yeah,
But I think of Miss Bowen in her Royal Spinus type series. And so in this case, at the end, instead of her slipping down into a ditch and she's about to drown, I might have her trip, fall down in the mud. And that earlier remark about the smell of rotten eggs being a cycle of life and death, and so forth. She would stand up now covered with mud, stinking like rotten eggs, and having a whole different attitude toward that smell. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah,
would just sort of
yeah,
carry that. It'd be klutzy and cumbersome, and then now she has to go back to the office smelling like this.
yeah,
Okay, so,
yeah, yeah.
that's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Okay.
great because I think it is. I think it's interesting that the use of humor
Mhm.
is in all of these would change the feel of the scenes or not, right?
Right. And
Um,
honestly, in a lot of mine too, even the nature scenes, I mean, I kind of cut out a great blue heron spearing a fish and tossing it, and swallowing it whole. Those are life and death things, and you don't think about it because it's a wildlife doing it.
yeah,
But it really is, everything in nature is survival. Everything in nature is life or death. And that is kind of a theme through my books. So yeah, I would change that considerably.
Yeah. Cindy, what do you think? Since you're writing both, like what would be different about the scene that you read, just in how you describe the trail, not because of why they're going there or whatever. When you think about just describing that trail walk, is there things that would be different to make it more cozy versus gritty?
Well, I had an answer and then you threw me a different question.
Oh, sorry. You can answer the first one. That's okay.
So other than the swearing, which, I can't have in the cozies, and as you knew from Saturday, I have quite a, I read today, I picked one without, but I think the difference, and I didn't think of it till you asked this question, is that Casey is more of a lone wolf. She's more like she has people around her, but she's more on her own for a lot of things. Whereas in the cozy, I have this cast of characters that all come together all the time. They're always helping each other. They're always, so it's just more of a collaboration.
Yeah.
I get more probably deeper into Casey's psyche than I do
Yeah.
Charlie, who's the character in the cozy. So yeah, but I don't know that I would describe like the trail that different, except, how do you make that lighter? I mean, there's,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I don't know that that would change that much, but
Yeah.
just maybe she wouldn't be alone. She
Right.
wasn't alone either, but I mean, she'd have her dogs with her, and she'd have, like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the characters, because that's the biggest difference I think with the book, other than the swearing. Yeah.
Yeah. Gary, what about you?
For me, I think if I were writing cozies, I would make different choices about what to describe or how it's set. And there's some key elements to that. One is, the part I read, and the part I read on Saturday too is a setting one. It's daytime versus nighttime is a big, daytime is dark, fog, makes it spooky. When it happens, so time of day, season, I have one story set in COVID. The book that's about to come out, it's set during COVID. That right there darkens it right up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to do that in a cozy. At least it would be challenging. So, and time of year, if it's winter versus if it's summer, a nice time of year. And the situation, I wouldn't have an injured dog. I would have a happy dog. He'd be adopting a dog that doesn't have a cut in his belly. I would focus on the beautiful trees and the flowers and, things like that.
Yeah.
So, the situation and the when, I think, are as important to what you choose to describe as the actual setting itself.
Yeah. I was thinking about that in relation to what Christy read on Saturday, and this is a little bit of a disadvantage for the folks who weren't there on Saturday who are going to watch this, but she read a passage that was completely set at night. And I thought, well, that's part of it too, as Gary just said. If it was set during the daytime, it would have a totally different feel than if it was set at night. So it's interesting to me. It's interesting to me how both simple and complex those choices are. At some level, they're fairly obvious, but at some level, you guys are doing stuff in the books that aren't simple to make these scenes come alive in specific kinds of ways to give the feeling that you want, which I think is really cool to think about. I am actually going to ask a question that's a little bit off topic that was triggered by something that Cindy said about the swearing. And I know that, like, when I talk to rom-com authors, for example, the rules for rom-com is that the couple has to get together at the end and have a reasonable expectation for happily ever after, or it's not a rom-com, right? There might be romance in the book, but it's not a rom-com if it doesn't have some kind of a happy ending. Are there rules? I mean, rules loosely in quotes for like cozies versus other kinds of mysteries? Like, is it true that you wouldn't be able to swear, for an example, in a cozy versus like a more gritty mystery?
I think so. I actually had a reviewer once drop me a really nasty 1-star review on Amazon. I'm not even writing cozies, but her comment was that she would never read my stuff again because of all the language and sex, and we're talking The Mountain Man's Dog, which is close to cozy. And I'm like, would you please tell my readers where the language and sex are? Because those are the chapters they want to read.
Yeah, exactly. Really?
Yeah, I mean, in a hard-nosed mystery, people expect some F-bombs and some hard language, and in a cozy, definitely not. At least that's my experience. I'll defer to the
Emmeline, you look
cozy
like you.
So, yeah, I think a lot of the expectation with cozy mystery is a lot of the standards are it's always an amateur sleuth. They're never a professional investigator. And it also like they are very community driven stories, and they have to have a happy ending. You'll never see a cozy that ends without justice being served. And it's usually like the murder happens, it throws the community out of balance. The cozy, like the amateur sleuth kind of solves the mystery, kind of brings everything back into balance. And you're probably not going to see language. You're not going to see really like on the page, violence or sex. It'll fade to black really quickly. But there's ways that you can push the boundaries. Like my end up on a lot of like millennial cozy lists or cozies that push the boundaries. But it's because of like things that I talk about, like homelessness, and I work in some real life issues, but I don't linger there for a long time, but I acknowledge they're part of the world, but it still meets otherwise all of the cozy standards.
Yeah.
And I have to add to that. I say I do traditional mystery, but I like ending a story knowing that justice has prevailed. I do have some cussing in there, and it's an amateur sleuth because it's always a refuge manager or volunteer or someone who has to step up and do these things. It's not, but it's not really cozy in the sense of that there's not a lot of humor all of the time. I mean, I don't know. I don't consider them cozy, what I write.
No, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
And I should note, traditional mystery actually has a very specific meaning that we are not using properly.
Okay. Tell me, Emmeline.
Yeah, please.
I'd have to
go for it.
I mean, I'd have to think of like a better way, but traditional, if you look, it's like Agatha Christie is frequently called king of the cozies, but arguably she's really more of a traditional mystery writer. And traditional mysteries are, it's versus like they're lighter than soft boiled, which is lighter than hard boiled. And you can actually, it's kind of fun if you look at like British publishing, what they call a cozy is kind of what we call traditional, where they might not have amateur sleuths, but it's a different feel. And so my point is, like, if you look up the meaning, there's people that can describe it a lot better than I can, but there is a very specific meaning.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that'll have to be next year, the next meeting where we all get together and we talk about what are all the differences between the genres, which I always actually find fascinating as well, just because we make, humans like to make categories. That's one of our best things. And then we like to argue about which is right, what is the right definition of a category, and then there'll be like sort of this settled definition of a category, and then some writer will come along and really subvert it, which is also really fun. And like Emmeline, you talked about the fact that like you do that a little bit in the sense that you bring up some issues that are a little bit harder in yours. So I think it's fun to see how people play with those categorizations and play around with.
Yeah, and
Well,
I
I think
wanted to say that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would say the key part, I think, is reader expectations. Is you want the cozy reader to still enjoy it. If they pick it up and there's like an animal death on the third page, they're going to be really angry in their notes.
I don't know. I think even a grittier mystery, the readers would be mad if you kill off the dog.
John Wick, yeah.
There's definitely certain things that we cannot do, and animal harming is one of them. Animals and kids, especially in a cozy. Right. But I just wanted to point out that even with cozies, not every cozy is humorous.
And not all traditional ones are not. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And like Emmeline said, we do in cozies, a lot of us do deal with harder, stronger issues as well, but it's how you deal with them with a
Yeah,
lighter
yeah.
hand. And like she said, not dwelling on them for long periods of
Right.
And the type of humor differs too. In a traditional or hard boiled, the humor is going to be cutting and sort of, morbid. And in a cozy, I don't think you can go there. Not for long anyway. You got to
Yeah,
touch
yeah.
very lightly on that.
And I
Yeah.
was going to say with it, like reader expectation, like I write more of a police procedural and you're dealing with more, a little bit harder crime. So there's going to be an expectation to language and different things like that are
Yeah.
true to the job that's being done or to
Yeah.
the stuff they're seeing, which is going to be a little harder and grittier,
Yeah.
bloodier
Yeah.
sometimes. So
And interestingly enough, that all kind of goes back to setting too, because like if you are setting your, like you set don't ask, don't follow in a law office, which might have different feel of how people talk and the words they use versus, a police precinct,
Yeah.
and so it's interesting how that all then comes back around that.
And then there's noir.
Pardon?
And then there's noir, that other branch.
Yeah, that none of
mystery.
us quite know what it is, but we know it is when we
Nothing
hear
ever-
it.
So the best description I've ever heard of noir is your main character starts out screwed and ends up screweder.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
and I would also point out, even like a police procedural, I mean, the author's point of view can really change because, like, we talk about like a lot of police procedurals being gritty, but if you look at like Kate Ellis, who has like a 20-some book series, she's an English author. Hers are very much on that traditional sort of vein where there isn't language and there isn't violence, but it is still police procedurals.
Yeah.
And I just want to say I have a lot of humor in my gritty mystery
Yeah.
compared to my cozy, but it's sarcastic humor.
Yes.
Whereas I really
Yeah.
try not to be too sarcastic in the cozy. So
You also have some situational humor.
yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Casey gets in some
I
messes.
actually find that really fascinating, Cindy, about your books, is just because I think this is another thing that's fun for each of you. Each of you have written things that you're things that whatever that thing is that. But for Cindy, with your writing about, being a probation officer, like there's a lot of humor in there that I'm sure that your friends and fans who are in that space
Right.
really appreciate, because it comes from knowing that sometimes
Dark-
humor is the
yeah.
only way you can deal with a bad situation.
If you don't
it's fun
laugh,
to-
you'll cry,
but-
right? You have to laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
I've told Cindy I grew up in Phoenix. I walked barefoot on those hot sidewalks and would run to the swimming pool every day. I couldn't live there now for love nor money, but when I read her books, I look at that setting and I go, "Oh my gosh, she nailed that."
Yeah.
Yeah. And to
that's
me,
what
that's
all you can hope for is that people that know the area that you're writing about
Yeah.
are going to think
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
are
That's
going
why
to
it's like
got
to
it
make
right.
a face, because it's like, I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. You just, climb into my imagination.
Yeah.
But it can still feel authentic, right? Like it can
Yes.
still
Yeah.
feel authentic to the Pacific Northwest, and people will be like, "Oh, this is fictional, but I could see, where it could be."
there's
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
more authentic than a coffee cart in Portland.
Yes.
Oh, I've had people email me and ask like, "Oh, is this the cart like the pot it said at?" And they've all been different answers, and no one's been right. Um, because it's purposely a mix, but it's fun, and I love that people, and there's
Yeah.
a bar in one, and that's in multiple books, and people have emailed me like asking, is it based off like this bar or this bar? And I love that it feels authentic enough that people think they know the real place.
Yeah. That's great. Well, we are coming up on an hour, so let's tie things up. We don't have to tie it up quickly, but we'll start on our kind of last question of if each of you would like to share a little bit about where people can find you. And you don't have to share like all of your connections, but maybe share the one that you like to use the most so that people can find you there. Like if you're super active on Instagram or Facebook, or you prefer emails, or go to your website, or whatever piece that you prefer people to connect with you at. And then I know you've all got books coming out, and so if you could just talk about your upcoming books, and I will let people know now, just in case I forget to say it at the end, that we are in the process at the store of adding the upcoming books to our website. Usually like a little ways down, it'll say upcoming books for pre-order. We're working on getting everybody's upcoming books on those pages. Sometimes we are limited by the publisher who hasn't put stuff out. So we talked about this on Saturday. Cindy's book hadn't come out until just the last minute, and so we weren't able to get it in for Saturday, but we have them on order and those should be in. But so if you don't see somebody's book come back to the website, because it probably means that we have not physically been able to put it up there because it isn't out for us to put up yet, but it will be. And so, yeah, Cindy, if you want to go first and just talk about your upcoming book and where people can connect with you.
So my early termination just came out in January, so that's pretty new, and I know you didn't have it till recently. Diamond in the Rough, Wiggle Butt Manor Mystery, my cozy, comes out in May, and that's also a series. Right now I have a 3-book contract, so look for that, and then another book every year. So I'm trying to do like every 6 months, have a book come out. And I am on social media on all of it, and I don't do any of it well.
Okay.
So I'm under Cindy Goyette on everything. My website is ccgoyette.com, and I don't update that very well either. So that's, it should have been my New Year's resolution, but we're almost to March.
That's okay. Life gets in the way. So
look at my name, you'll find me, maybe,
yes.
maybe not.
You will actually, because I've done that before too. If I need like book covers or photos or whatever, everybody's out there. So if you go searching, they'll be there. And also dogs. She has cute pictures of dogs.
I'm a big dog person. So
Gary, you want to go ahead and go next?
Sure. So my information is probably most easily found on my website, GaryCorbinWriting.com. All my books are there and the plays that I've written and stuff like that. My new book, The Injustice of Valor, the 6th book in the Valerie Dawes thrillers, comes out March 25th. I'm also on Facebook, and I have a Facebook author page, which I sometimes remember to post stuff on.
Go ahead, Emmeline.
Well, you can, I do link to, I think, all of my social media handles on my website, which is emmelineDuncan.com. I am the most active on Instagram, and I am on as writer Emmeline Duncan. You will see lots of Great Pyrenees and lots of kitten pictures, in addition to some
Yay.
book stuff. As far as books, my next book comes out April 29th, and that is Fatal Bruhaha, and that is the 5th Ground Rules mystery. And then at the end of July, I have Mayhem at a Halloween Wedding coming out, and that's the second of my Halloween series. And yeah, and so you can pre-order both of those for the Vintage Books and wherever you'd like.
Mary.
Yeah, so I would say go to my website. It's where all my social media handles are as well, just marykeliikoa.com. I'm probably most active on Facebook, actually, which is just Mary Keliikoa Author. And then Instagram second, which is also Mary Keliikoa Author, but you can catch all of that. You sign up for my newsletter. I send it once a month off my website, and I usually do a free giveaway of friends' books or a book or something every month. So, and my next book is Killer Tracks. It's the 3rd book in the Misty Pines mystery series. It's a continuation. We've got a dead body in Misty Pines, and we've got Jackson Abbey up on the mountain, and some weird happenings in both locations that will intersect. So I'm very excited about the book. It'll be out on September 10th.
I was going to say, what was the date again? Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And Christy, we mentioned at the beginning when your book's coming out, but go ahead and say again.
Yes. I have Eerie Ending. It's I also have a 3-book contract. The first book is Eerie Ending, which takes place at Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge in Ohio, on the southwest shores of Lake Erie. The second book takes place about an hour and a half north of Las Vegas at Pahranagat National Wildlife Refuge. So very different environment, and it's called Shining Water, and it involves a desert refuge, an angry rancher, and a national security issue with the Nevada Test and Training Range. So there's a little bit more involved with that. And then the third book, Trust Fall, takes place in West Virginia at the National Conservation Training Center. And that one involves a serial killer out to kill leadership within the Fish and Wildlife Service. So it's kind of different, but my characters, the ones in the first book, you'll see them in the second, and then you'll see the one from the first and the third, so they kind of do a hopscotch.
Yeah.
I have a pretty good following on Facebook as Christy Smith, which is my real name. And I just added the Christy J Kendall page to that because people never switch. They follow me wherever so I wasn't going to fool with that. But my website, ChristyJKendall.com, has my Facebook connection on it.
Okay.
It also has a series of events for this year if anyone wants to see me somewhere else.
Yay. Okay.
But this is fun. Thank you, Christy, for having
You're
us
welcome.
tonight.
And Paula.
For a minute, I forgot what we were talking about.
That's okay.
My website is paulacharles.com. And I am on Facebook and Instagram, actually, where I'm active on both of them. About a year ago, my accounts got hacked and I got locked out of them. So now I am Rainy Day Mysteries on both Facebook and Instagram. There's still those old accounts out there, but I cannot access them. So my second book, which I read from tonight, Ask Me No Questions, just came out in late January. It's the second in the Hometown Hardware. And then my second Zen Goat just came out as of Saturday, and it is called Goats Just Want to Have Fun.
And we, just so you know, everybody who's out there who happened to be there on Saturday when we didn't have it, we have ordered our copies, so they should be in soon, and we'll throw it up on social media when they come in. So they're coming. All right. Thank you all so much. This was so much fun. I really appreciate you thinking all about setting and stories and reading, and it's always just fun to hear everybody's different perspective. I really appreciate it. Coming up next at the store, we will have an event for Vintage Books Live at the end of March, and we're going to do them always the last Tuesday of the month. But I'm not sure what we're going to do them about yet, so I can't announce that yet because I'm still in the process of planning it. April will probably be local poets in celebration of National Poetry Month, but March we haven't quite figured it out, so I will get that up on social media once we know. The books for the authors will go up on our pre-order page, and we'll have little coming soon ads for all of them when they get a little bit closer, so that people, if you forget, and then you'll see the ads coming out to remind you. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank all of you for being here. It was very fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye, everybody.